mission is beyond recognition.
Welcome to Recovery Soapbox, brought to you by Brighton Recovery Center. My name is Garrett Cimino, and I'm the clinical director of Brighton Recovery Center's Willow Creek location. And we're here with Molly Davis and Bri to talk about their internship experience. So let's just start with this. Molly and Bri, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then how you came to be an intern with Brighton.
You go first. So I did my internship at Willow Creek for a year, and now I work at the Ogden IOP.
And what do you do at Ogden IOP?
I'm just a therapist. We kind of work as just like a 3-person team there, kind of all sharing like the responsibilities. There's also a case manager and a director.
Nice. And what was your internship here? What year, what program?
It was my second year MSW practicum internship, and I was just an intern, like specifically, I guess, under you, but I worked or shadowed like all the therapists and just worked within the clinical team.
Got it. And then Bri, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about who you are and how you got to us.
Okay, so I am Bri, and I just kind of heard about Brighton through the grapevine. I was doing the Bachelors program for social work, and I was also doing the substance use disorder counseling program. So because I was doing them in combo, I had to find a treatment center to do my internship at. So I just had heard about Brighton just from a few other students, and it's kind of funny because I think Brighton was actually my third choice, and the first two did not end up working out, but I definitely think that worked out for a reason, and it was definitely where I was meant to be, and I loved my experience here. What else?
So what about like the initial interview process and choosing us where made you think, hey, this might be a good fit for what I'm going for?
So in the program, I would hear a lot about like supervisors not being as, I don't know, like lacking communication. So when I came here for my interview initially, it was very human. I didn't feel like I was like under a microscope. Our conversation was very natural. You brought in like Kenzie, who's a therapist, and I think Vicky and Zach all came in to meet me as well. And it just felt very natural and like it would be a good fit.
Okay. And when you were choosing your internship and then you eventually chose to come to Brighton, what were you hoping to get when this whole thing started? And you're just like, okay, I've got a year to do this. What do I want to get out of it? What was that like for you? What were you hoping to accomplish?
So I had actually spoken with a previous intern so we were both interns this last year, so fall, spring 2019, 2020. And I had spoken with one of the previous interns from the previous year, bachelor's level as well. And she kind of just like hyped up Brighton and said that her experience here was a lot different from many other like bachelor's level students, and that she felt that she had a lot more opportunities that other students didn't quite get, like actually being able to run groups and sit in on sessions. So that was kind of a big thing for me that I was excited about here.
Great. What were some of your most fun moments? What was something that you're like, wow, I'm really enjoying this? And this could be an experience, it could be a formal thing, it could be a casual thing. What was there anything that was even fun about this experience for you?
Want me to go first? You kind of looked to me there. So when I first started, I was very nervous because, I mean, this is something that I'd never really done before. So on like day 1 or 2, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go just be myself. And I just went up and I would sit with the LTs, so the life techs here at Brighton, and I'd just go up to the desk and chit chat with them and get to know them. And I think the more that I just got to know the team at Brighton, the more fun I had. Okay. So that was some of my fun times, was just like sitting up at the LT desk and chit chatting. Just
kind of that community and connection and feeling like part of a team.
Yeah, yep.
That's one of the things I like about it too, is honestly, there's so many places that we can work that feel very, very siloed, or that they feel very like disconnected, like, oh, we have different roles and so we can't interact. And that's one of the things I've always enjoyed about working where we work, is just that connection. One of the things that I make sure is really, really important, or one of the things that I hope gets communicated in the internship process, is that this is an extension of your schooling. I want, whenever we're working with interns, for it to be like, okay, you're here for school, so this needs to be a learning experience for you. Like, interns are not free labor. They're not the people to come in on the days when we don't want to come in. They're not people to do the things that we don't feel like doing. It's like, how can we make this a learning experience for you? And so with that, I wonder, what were some of your best learning experiences?
I think one of my best learning experiences was being able to participate in the treatment team, even though sometimes I didn't have anything like specific to contribute myself before I got clients. It was just interesting to see how all the different aspects of the team came together and kind of had like their own perspective. It was interesting to hear from like the doctor and the medical team for that side, and something I'd never really experienced before. So that was really helpful. And also just like our clinical team right after treatment team, to see how like all the therapists were dealing with like the hardships of like their client and their caseload, and just getting like the opinions of other clinicians was really helpful.
Yeah. It's important to have that experience where we can actually talk openly and honestly about what's going on, because this work that we do is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really rewarding and it's really meaningful, but it's hard. And if we don't have kind of a safe place to talk about it, talk about what's going on, not just with our clients, but for ourselves, like, there's a recipe for burnout right there. And so making sure that you got to see that, like, that makes me really, really happy.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't always exist in other places.
What was the question again?
Yeah, so this is about what was one of your best learning experiences?
Okay. I was thinking about how I wanted to just add to what you said about how you consider this yourself, and as, pretty much our supervisor when we're interns, you consider this to be an extension of our learning. I just think it's really important to highlight that and drive that to other like interns who are interested in coming to Brighton, because I think that as a bachelor's level student is one of the things that made this such a good learning experience, is that you weren't just giving us casework or like little, mundane things that maybe the team didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So that was really awesome to me. But I think I think just my best learning experiences in general at Brighton were just things that kind of challenged me the most, or things where I felt most uncomfortable. So for example, one of the groups that I was running, we just had, I brought up a topic that was a little, I don't know, it was sensitive for one of our clients. And so, 45 minutes of this hour-long group was kind of just sitting there like, I don't know how to recover from this, but it was, I don't know, I think that there was, at the end of it, I was able to kind of challenge myself and kind of tie the group back up. And I don't know, it was humbling, I guess, to be like, yeah, I messed that up, and now I've learned how to present that better next time. But that was one of my biggest learning moments for sure. And I just think the things that were the most uncomfortable or the most challenging for me are definitely the things that I learned the most from.
Well, and that's the work we do with our clients, right? That's the work that we do as social workers and as therapists in this field, is help get people to that place of uncomfortability where they can learn and grow. And so if we're not practicing that ourselves and we're not modeling it, how can we expect someone else to do that? It's like, hey, watch me never challenge myself and never get uncomfortable, but I need you to do that or else you won't grow. And so being able to model that for other people, I think, is great. And we can't really model it for other people unless we actually get in there and do it ourselves. And then we can have a little more empathy for what their experience is like. One of the things that I think is really important for young therapists to develop is an understanding of self and how we relate to the world, how we relate to other people, how we challenge ourselves. What is something that you both learned about yourself during this internship process?
I have always been able to identify that I'm pretty resilient, but I think, I don't know, just coming back to the whole stepping outside of my comfort zone and being okay with that was something that I learned a lot about myself. And like that group, for example, where things kind of went wrong, instead of being like still just trying to roll with it and pretend like nothing was happening, I think learning to just be like, yep, I made a mistake with clients, and use that human experience of like, yeah, we don't know it all. We're here to partner with you. I don't know, using that like sense of myself, just kind of like present as another human with clients instead of pretending like I know everything of what I'm doing was beneficial for me. I don't know. Does that answer that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Molly, what's something you learned about yourself in this process?
I think I learned that I can still be myself, like, to an extent, and like be like a professional, like in the work industry. Because when I first started, I was like, I have to just hammer out like all the emotion and just be like super like baseline with everybody. And then I found myself like getting emotional with doing the work, and I felt really guilty about it. But then I was like, that shows me that you can't just will away emotions, and that's not what we're asking our clients to do either. We're asking them to like understand them and work with them. So I can understand like the shame that people feel about feeling stuff they don't want to feel in the moment. And I think that was really helpful and like a really difficult learning experience for me to like, sometimes I would cry at work, and I only did twice, which was like pretty good for me, but
yeah.
So.
But it's one of those things, like if you cry at work because you're responding to human issues, and some of the work we do, again, it's really, really hard and it can be really, really sad. If that's why we're crying, because we're in response to an actual human experience, I'm all for that. As long as you guys weren't crying because it's like, oh, I have too much work, or I hate everything I'm doing. That's not what we want. You know, we don't want that, like, you know, stereotypical, like crying under the desk because you hate everything. But if it's just part of a real human experience, that's what we love. I tell the people I'm working with, because I find myself very, very informal, you know, and trying to make that distinction between being a professional and being a person. So I try and let people know right off the bat, hey, guys, I am a regular person. I am a 37-year-old man who has his own experiences and his own faults and his own flaws. And I'm going to be professional, and I'm going to do my best to take care of you. But if you expect anything other than a regular person, we need to reevaluate what we're doing, because I'm just going to be a real person to you. And that's, I think, one of the best gifts that we can give to the people we work with is just being a real person for them.
I agree.
What was one of your hardest moments? What was really tough for you, either personally, professionally, a combination of the both? What was really hard?
I think going back to one of those times I cried at work is when I first found out that a girl that I was working with was in the hospital after like discharging from treatment. And at first it didn't bother me. I was like, I knew this was going to happen. They prepare you for it in school. We read about it. But like when it was like an actual person and not just like a number or like a description of someone, it was just really hard for me. And I was kind of feeling like it wasn't just like the impact of that one person, but just like realizing like this is going to happen like over and over again in this industry. And you get really connected to your patients, and just like you want them to succeed, and you want them to want to succeed, and when they can't or don't, it's just really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that moment. Bri?
I already spoke about my group experience, but I think one thing too, because it's just important to recognize that this work is hard and that we do need to take care of ourselves, and like some of the things that we hear are going to be really challenging. Or when I first started, I would just like go through people's biopsychosocials. So that's our assessment that we do upon intake, right?
Yeah.
Just to kind of get someone's full history. And I would just go through them just because I wanted to know who we were working with, and I wanted to know when I was in group, like everybody's history, right? And I think just there were some things in some of those that, you know, it's challenging to read. And I think that just kind of highlights how this work, it's very important to be able to take care of yourself and, I don't know, just have your own self-care plan, because some of the things that we're going to hear and read and experience are just really difficult, especially when, you know, nothing like these things have ever happened to me. So yeah, just hearing some of that stuff and seeing some of that stuff, it helps you kind of resonate. Obviously, as social workers, like we need to know someone's full history, but it is challenging, some of the things, especially when, you know, us being social workers, we're very empathetic people. So it's like the things that I'm seeing and reading, it's like, it's very easy to take that kind of stuff home. As social workers, we're just very empathetic people, and it's easy to take the stuff that we're hearing and reading and experiencing at work home with us. So I think one of the most challenging things that we need to do as social workers is having a plan to take care of ourselves and not carry the weight of what we're hearing home.
Okay. So how did you both do that? I mean, you had your internship experience with us. You both worked outside of the internship. You were both going to school. You know, you had personal lives and social lives. How did you balance that? And what did you do to take care of yourselves during this year?
Well, you told us early on, like maybe our first day, to put like Tiger text on Do Not Disturb when we're not at work. And at first I didn't really take that seriously. I was like, oh, it's not going to affect me that much. And then when you're at home at like 9 p.m. and you get like 14 messages about something that's going on, you can't help but like kind of get tied into it, like emotionally and mentally or whatever's going on. So after a while I was just like, yeah, like when I leave, this has to be a boundary for myself, even though this is just an internship. And I still do that now where I work. Mm-hmm. Also just like making sure I wasn't giving up any of the habits I was doing before, even though like sometimes you feel like, oh, people are going through such hard stuff and I'm just like watching TV and chilling out, and that makes me feel guilty, but you have to do it or you can't help anybody else or do anything. So
yeah, to what Molly said, I think when we're like new to this field, especially, we feel guilty if we're not taking this stuff home with us and thinking about the clients 24/7 and their well-being and how they're doing while we're not there. So I can relate to that. So one of the things, and I think I was terrible at self-care, and I don't think until probably halfway through my time at Brighton I was able to kind of be like, yeah, self-care is actually important and I do need to come up with a plan. So I think just like Molly was saying, it's important to recognize that as social workers, we don't need to be taking those problems home with us. And so one thing, and I think it was one of the other interns that I heard her mention, when about halfway through my time at Brighton, I would get off and come home and I would just change my clothes and just be like, okay, I'm not at Brighton anymore. I am home now. And for me, that recognizing that I was home was just changing my outfit and getting out of those clothes. So it's like, I'm no longer, Bachelors of Social Work Bri. I'm just Bri at home.
Okay, good. The stuff we learn in school, it's important and it's true. But then when you get into the field, the application of this is different. How did you work on translating what you were learning in the books and what you were learning in the classroom to what we actually do as social workers and what we actually did at Brighton? How did you make that transition? How did you make that happen?
I think for certain things you almost had to not ignore it, but just learn it, relearn it in a different way, like how you interact human to human rather than like just reading about the right response, because oftentimes clients will say something that you hadn't, like you couldn't expect or like think that they would say, and you just have to like on the fly figure out how to address that, and you can't like learn that from a book.
And just so you know, that doesn't go away.
Yeah.
I'm 11 years now in this field and I am still getting surprised regularly. It's like, oh, I haven't heard that before, and oh, what do I do here? And so yeah, I guess just kind of like making it a constant learning process and realizing like the more we know, the less we know, or the more we've been doing this, we realize that like, hey, we don't have all the answers. How do you translate it, Bri? Because Molly, had the master's experience and you were doing your bachelor's and the substance use program. How did you work on translating that learning?
So I think it's kind of interesting because bachelor's level social work education, it's like, this is all the stuff that you can do if you get your master's. Like a lot of the classes are like that. So again, going back to Brighton, I feel like giving me a little bit more leeway as a bachelor's level student to sit in and observe sessions, I think was a big part of my learning, where it was like, I would hear you say something and I'd be like, okay, I think I know what he's doing here. Or like, I think motivational interviewing is one of the things that is very, like, I could hear that. So that was one thing that I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember learning about this, especially from the substance use disorder counseling program, which I do feel like I took a lot more from that was more applicable to Brighton.
Got it.
I don't know. I think just it was funny because the day that I started at Brighton, I actually did open up my notes that morning and I was like, okay, I need to remember everything that I learned. And then I was like, there's no way. So we're just going into this. But I think there's just moments where you're kind of like, when I would be leading a group or I would be sitting in on a session where I can just recall something that I did learn and apply it. But I think a lot of the learning when it comes to social work comes from doing the work. Mm-hmm. I just don't think the books and the classes and everything can really prepare you for actually being in the field. And that's why practicums and internships are so important.
Yeah. Well, and if I can just, pay you both a compliment, is when you both came, you just were super willing and just threw yourselves into the work. And that's how it was one of my first signs that I knew that this was going to work out with both of you, is because you're both just like, hey, I want to learn, I want to do this. And it just kind of shows that the more that you really, really like apply yourself and jump in and do some of that uncomfortable stuff and take a look at yourself, the more you're going to learn, the more you're going to be able to take away. Yeah. So what were some things that happened during your practicum that you feel really, really prepared you for the next step? What were some things that happened that Molly might have prepared you for going into the workforce? Bri, what are some things that happened that prepared you for going into the master's program and, your master's level internship?
So it's really interesting because I am definitely somebody who, I think everybody struggles with imposter syndrome a little bit. Uh-huh. And I think that just carries weight throughout, like when I never thought I would be in a master's program in a million years. So it's like I entered this master's program and sometimes I'm hearing things that we're talking about and I'm like, what? Like, I don't know what we're talking about. However, I do feel that, I don't know if it's appropriate to say this, but I do feel like my experience at Brighton did prepare me a lot more than some of the experiences that my other people in my cohort had. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think being able to observe sessions, like I said earlier, and sit in on those and be able to have that group leading experience in the ways that I did, far prepared me a lot more than some of the other people that are at my same level. It's interesting because I'll have conversations with people about sitting in on a group, or even just, I'm about to start this next internship and being prepared to do my own therapy work with people. And some of my friends are very nervous about being at that level. But I do feel like the experiences that I had, being able to sit in and observe an EMDR session, or just, it's not only that I was observing, it's that you were if you feel compelled to say something, go for it. Yeah. And you told me that there was nothing that I could say that you couldn't recover us from. So.
I hope that was true. I mean, but it is one of those things that, I wanted you guys to internalize that and to have that to help build your confidence. I mean, I'm sure that there are some things, if we can let the secret out, that maybe I couldn't recover from because I don't have all the answers. Yeah. But having you two feel empowered enough to just be like, hey, you have a voice. You matter in this room. We're here to take care of and work with other people. Yeah. So jump in and do that. Yeah. Well, if I can speak to something a little more specific, Bri, you and I got to do some work with sex addiction with Cameron Carver, who's a marriage and family therapist. He's the clinical director of our Ogden location, the monastery. Yeah. And we got to do some work on sex addiction, which is a whole different animal. Totally. And I think is that still your internship for your master's? Yep. So you want to talk a little bit about that and the preparation?
Yeah. So it's interesting because being in the addiction world, there's this whole shame piece that a lot of addiction is really rooted in, and seeing somebody struggling with not only substance abuse, but also this whole sex addiction piece really challenged my capacity to just kind of sit with somebody and hear these things that, sex isn't something that we talk about as a society. No. So the amount of shame that's rooted in that is just deep. It runs deep. So being able to just kind of sit with somebody through that, I think that was a really challenging experience for me as well.
I think both personally and professionally, because of how uncomfortable these topics can be.
But I I enjoyed being able to like establish rapport with somebody who was struggling with something like that. And yeah, definitely launched me into being like, talking with Cameron and him suggesting where I'm going to be doing my internship next semester.
Yeah.
I'm really excited, but I don't know. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that was great.
Okay.
Molly, what was something that you did, that you worked on, that really prepared you for that next step?
So the group work was huge because now I'm just running at least 1 or 2 groups a day.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have a lot of experience running groups with adults. I have like experience when I was like a volunteer in high school to run like youth groups and stuff like that. But it's different with adults that have like this whole past. And I also learned a little bit of what it's like to just come into like this workforce as like a younger woman in this field, and how sometimes people are just going to hear things differently because of like who I am.
Yeah.
And how receptive they are to that. Sometimes I can control that and sometimes I can't, and that's been like a big thing for me because like there's always like the questions of like, are you in recovery yourself? Like, how old are you? Do you have like experience? And my answers don't always matter because I feel like if I'm still doing like the work with them, they can see it whichever way they want, and we can both like grow from that experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think what you're saying there also just kind of speaks to the studies that have been done on what works in therapy, and it's the quality of connection in the therapeutic relationship rather than like observable characteristics like age and gender and years of experience and stuff like that. People just want to be cared for. They want to feel like they're being taken care of. They want to feel like someone else says, hey, you matter in this moment. What advice would you give somebody else going into an internship, whether at Brighton or somewhere else? If maybe a classmate or a peer or a family member or a friend came to you and said, hey, I'm doing this, I'm going to start an internship or a practicum, what would you say to them to help them get the most out of their experience?
I think something that's both good and bad in different ways is just that this, like being in therapy, like people will be able to pick up on if you want to be there or not. Whereas like other jobs, maybe your clients won't be able to tell as much. But so just be aware of like that you're not as good at like hiding yourself as you think. And so just be honest about it and as transparent as you can. Like if you're having a bad day, start being like, I'm having a bad day. I didn't sleep last night. I'm tired. I'm still here for you, rather than, because they're going to know either way, rather than trying to hide it.
Well, and I think learning to navigate that is so important.
Yeah.
We need to bring ourselves into this work, and there's a way to bring ourselves into the work and be a human and be a person without making the work all about us. We never want to be those therapists who like, it's turning into, oh, this is my therapy session right now. We all know those people. And that can be really disappointing when it happens at times. But being a real person with real emotions, being able to model what it's like to be authentic and genuine and real and natural is just such a beautiful thing.
So for me, my work history for the past 7 years is I work for a very corporate world. So doing something like this in a completely different setting where there's not something that needs to be done every second of every moment that I'm there was very challenging for me. So day one, I was just like, where am I supposed to be? What do I need to do? Is there something for me to do? And day two, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in there and just pretend like I know what I'm doing. But I think it's important to tell ourselves like, just pretend. However, I don't think we're actually pretending. I just think a lot of us, myself, speaking for myself, like back to the whole imposter syndrome thing, like we tell ourselves like, oh, there's no way I'm smart enough to be doing this. How can I be sitting across from somebody and, telling them or helping them heal through whatever they're going through? And I think just telling yourself, like day two at Brighton, I was just like, and that's when I went up to the LT desk and was like, I'm just gonna go make friends and make myself welcome. And that was very, very, very impactful for me, because I feel like from that change of my own headspace is when I really was able to become a little more successful and present myself as more confident. Yeah. And I think presenting myself as confident was important to like awaken that for myself and be like, no, you've been studying this for the past, however many years, right? So
Good. Okay. So last question is, what is next for both of you? Where do you see this trajectory of your career going?
Well, when I first finished my time at Brighton, I took a job with another company, and I kind of thought like I need like a different experience, like something, because it was crisis work. I was like, that's very different than substance use, but it might like have something to do with it, so that will help me. And it was just very fast paced and unpredictable, and it showed me like what I do and don't like again, because I had forgotten that, getting like comfortable at Brighton. And so now I'm working with Brighton again, and I see myself like working with this company in some capacity for a while.
So for me, so Brighton was a great experience, and I definitely see myself working in like the substance abuse field. I loved it because, you know, my next learning experience is the master's program. I did want to challenge myself to do something a little bit different. So that's why my internship it's not just sex addiction. It's just kind of outpatient therapy with a focus on sex addiction. So I think challenging myself to try something a little bit different is important to my growth, even though it's unfortunate. Like I'm like, I wish I could just be at Brighton because that's where I got comfortable. But I think, you know, in this field, it's important at least for my growing, like my learning and my growth, it's important for me to step outside of what was comfortable for me. So, but I do feel, I found out with my next internship that like I'm going to have my own little caseload, and it doesn't feel as overwhelming because I do feel like the work that I did here, being able to sit in on sessions primarily and kind of have a voice throughout those sessions and think back to the people that I know that I made a difference with or a good connection with, is like driving that, like, okay, you can do it. We all have to start somewhere in this field, and it's nerve-wracking to be told, okay, you're going to be given your own, you know, small caseload. How do you feel about that? And I'm like, back to that whole imposter syndrome thing, like, am I smart enough? Am I going to be able to do that? And I think more than anything, you taught me, and just being here at Brighton just taught me to just show up as myself, right? And yeah, so that's what's next for me.
Well, thank you both for doing this. It was really good to be able to talk this through, because our internship experience did get cut short by the pandemic. And so I feel like this was a good conversation that we needed to have anyway about, you know, kind of this reflective piece on what was your experience like. And now that we finally got to do this, and now that we get to share this with other people. So just thank you both, not just for doing this today, but for the last year of your work. It meant a lot to me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you all for listening, those of you who took the time to view this. I really appreciate you tuning in and hearing what we had to say on therapy and intern experiences and all of that. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to the Recovery Soapbox and see what else we have in store for you. Thanks.